You know, I've just been talking to one of those thinking men. You know, the kind that you see in the cigarette commercials. This fellow, being one of our fine Plymouth All-Star salesmen, and being a thinking man, so to speak, feels very positive about the demonstration ride. He feels it's about the most important step in closing a sale. And he had a very unique idea. He explained it to me, and it was something like this. And believe me, it makes sense. Did you ever see a guy in a men's clothing store when he's trying to pick out a new hat? Well, he'll take the longest doggone time you can imagine, just standing and staring at the merchandise. The thing that's bothering him most is that he just can't figure out which one he'll look the best in. That is, until the salesman helps him make that decision by having him wear the hat and telling him what the hat really does for him. What does he see in that mirror? Oh, he sees himself, sure, but not as others see him. No, sir. Right now, he's, well, president of the local bank, or a diplomat on call for the State Department. Who knows, this purchase might make him the new Bat Masterson. And just a couple of minutes ago, all the hats were lookalikes to him. But trying one on has made the big difference. By golly, this hat makes him look like he wants to look. It does something for him. You think the same thing doesn't hold true when he looks for a new car? You bet your life it does. On the street, he sees model after model. So many, in fact, that when he gets in the showroom, it's hard for him to know when he's making the right choice. Oftentimes, a few bucks difference in a deal might swing him one way or the other. But deep down inside, he knows that's a pretty silly way to make such an important decision. But then, unless a salesman shows him, he doesn't know the big difference in Plymouth. And that's why I think that our all-star salesman friend is pretty right when he says that good demonstrating will also sell a Plymouth. And that's why we here at Plymouth are going to be pushing something that we believe will show your prospects the big difference in Plymouth. We call it the 2-mile tryout. And I've got a couple ideas on how you can take advantage of this 2-mile tryout campaign. Now, let's suppose you've got a walk-in. And after talking Plymouth for a while, maybe your normal approach to a demonstration ride doesn't cut any ice. So why not give him a straight-from-the-shoulder invitation to take a 2-mile tryout? It's easy to remember. It's easy to say. The phrase is worded so it expresses a benefit to him because it puts the burden of proof on the car. So put the phrase to work. All right, let's suppose you've got this guy in the demo. You slide in behind the wheel first, but you don't take off like a Redstone missile. As a matter of fact, you don't take off at all. You'll just want to sit there for a few moments and let him familiarize himself with the car. Tell him about some of the driving controls, the interior features, and so on. Things that'll make an impression on him while he's getting used to a strange car. Talk about the upholstery. Ask him to feel the safety padding and study the instruments. Show him how you have to push the neutral button before you start for safety. Now, when you release the parking brake, be sure to mention that it's independent and why. Then a push on the drive button and you're off. He may think that you're off on a casual ride, but there's nothing casual about this trip. You know exactly where you're going. You know where you can get out of the traffic that might make him nervous. You know how to steer clear of the corrugated streets that make any car rattle. But remember this, a proving ground with all the torture gimmicks is great, providing you've got one to use. Or if you can compare Ford and Chevrolet and Plymouth together at the same time, that's swell. But what this fellow wants is good, smooth riding. And that's what you want to give him and nothing else. Now, while you're driving, you ask him if he'd like some heat or some fresh air. And that gives you a chance to show how simple it is to get what he wants out of our push-button heater. Naturally, you say a few kind words about the power steering, how easy it is to steer, so relaxing to drive. If you're going to pass, you tell him to notice how easy it is in a Plymouth. But you tell him before you do it so he can appreciate it. In the same way, you point to a rolling intersection before you go over it. Not a proving grounds torture road, just something that lets you show how quick torsion air flattens out the car after a bump. Now, you know that Plymouth has good brakes, but he doesn't. So you ask him to watch how straight it stops when you hit the pedal hard. When it's safe to do so, you take your hands off the wheel, hit the pedal, take the wheel again, and brother, you've made a big sell for Plymouth safety. Now, you want him to get the feel of the car for himself. But if you ask him outright to drive, well, he'll probably refuse. After all, this is a strange car on a strange street. So just be natural, step out, walk around to his side of the car, and then invite him to drive. You don't have to ask him to take the wheel. You just don't leave him any other choice. Naturally, you want him to be comfortable, so you tell him to adjust the seat. Now, he's probably a little nervous, and you certainly don't want him to make any mistakes, so he can blame it on the car. So, you go through the starting routine again. The buttons, the key, the brake. And be sure to tell him that just a little gas takes the Plymouth a long way. So use a light touch on the accelerator. Now, gentlemen, right now, as you know, is a good time to shut your cotton-picking mouth and sell silence. Don't distract him with unnecessary conversation about features and facts, because you simply won't have his attention anyway. Sure, he'll make some comments, ask some questions, and while he's doing it, you'll be collecting some commitments and learning what it'll take to close this deal. Now, when he pulls up in front of the dealership, give him a few more big difference features. The windshield is real wide, the wipers give him a big, clean view, and the defrosters are aimed right smack at eye level. It'll make sense to him, but I don't have to tell you fellows all this. You guys know the pitch. For example, when he gets out, a word about the doorway will make him notice that it's real wide, easy to get into, easy to get out of. And maybe a last comment or two on styling. This fellow has felt what it would be like to own a Plymouth, and you might as well show him the frosting too. And I'm convinced that my Plymouth All-Star salesman friend will be mighty proud of your demonstrating job. You know, when the prospect first looked at that Plymouth in the showroom, he saw only about 35% of the real car. Just about what you're seeing in this little fellow here. No prospect can tell about the unseen 65% of Plymouth until you give him the 2-mile tryout. Let him experience the push-button controls, the passing power, the full-time power steering, the level torsion-air ride that he gets, plenty of elbow room, wide open spaces. Let your prospect get behind the wheel of an automobile that was built to be driven. And once he has seen that 35% and felt and experienced that 65%, once he drives a Plymouth, once he feels the big difference, he'll have all the reasons it takes to buy a Plymouth from you.
Angel was cutting roses, which she loves to do of an afternoon, and looking as sweet as a rose herself without any thorns. When I got home that day, I was feeling finer than a needle shower. It was one of those times when everything feels right. Appearances are deceptive, though. I forget sometimes there aren't any roses without thorns. And there's no 4-year-old automobile without dents, either. So who cares? In a few minutes, we were going to be taking a demonstration ride in the 1959 DeSoto. I could hardly wait to see Lammy's face when I told her. She was already in such a wonderful mood, and for no reason in the world, mind you, except she'd just been downtown pricing fur coats. She practically picked one out, too. Just like this one in the ad, dear. But what does it matter how much, darling? You know we can easily afford it, because you said yourself we're going to keep our car another year. Those who understand the matrimonial code know that when the lady of the house begins to telegraph with 1 foot, then is the time to climb a tree. So I hastened to assure Pet that I had not bought that car and there was no obligation. It was just that the salesman had offered to take us for a demonstration ride, and I could take a little ride all by myself. She was staying right here. Well, I didn't want to get into a catch-as-catch-can talking match with Sweetie Pie in front of an innocent third party, so I said, "All right, dear, I won't be long." And she said, "You'd better not be." I felt pretty foolish, but I forgot my embarrassment as I looked at that car. I just stood there and ogled it, like it was the whole Miss Universe beauty pageant, and I was the mayor of Long Beach. Wives have some kind of antenna that warns them when their husbands get that look on their faces. My wife was no exception. I was just in the middle of explaining to the salesman that she couldn't go along with us because she'd suddenly developed a splitting headache, when I heard her say, "Oh, it feels fine now, dear. I wouldn't dream of letting you go off in this beautiful car without me." I knew what she meant, all right. "Because you might buy it, you bum." Of course, she didn't say it out loud, but that salesman could read past the big print. But was he discouraged? About as discouraged as that old boy who said, "I have just begun to fight." He didn't exactly turn on the charm, but he was a lot more diplomatic than John Foster Dulles, and he knew exactly what he wanted to say. I don't know whether he'd memorized his spiel or not, but he was never at a loss for a word. I'm a salesman myself, and the day when I think I'm too good at it to learn from another salesman, I'm going to quit the racket before I begin to starve. So I really studied his technique, because in 2 minutes, I knew that this man was in the big leagues, or soon would be. It seemed to me that he sort of divided his pitch into 7 steps. In step 1, before we even took a good look at the car, he made the point very strongly that this year, DeSoto has an all-new automobile. In fact, one of the first things he said to me was, "Everything you see, everything you touch is new." Then he showed us the car, and he made this a big moment. I think he even stood in a certain spot so we could get the best angle, about 10 feet back and at the 10 o'clock position, as they say in these Air Force movies. And standing there, he made his second big point. New flare stream styling makes DeSoto the most beautiful car of 1959. He pointed out the long, sweeping lines that give it that low-to-the-ground look of speed, combined with a richer and more massive appearance than ever before. He walked us around the car, pointing out some of the exterior features that are new this year. The new grille, new headlight treatment, new front fenders, new hood, handsome new wheel covers, new roof line, new tapering rear deck, and further refinements in the beautifully integrated rear section of the car, such as the shadow box license plate holder. The third point he stressed very strongly was the big news under the hood. It includes not only the great turboflash engine, exclusive with DeSoto, and stepped up in power again this year, but exciting news about the Adventurer engine, which was available last year only on the premium-priced Adventurer model. In 1959, this fabulous, hotter-than-ever racing car power plant is optional on every model in the DeSoto line. And he pointed to the handsome medallion, which tells the world that this car has that Adventurer engine under the hood. Then the salesman moved on to point 4 of his 7-point program. A natural follow-up to the engine story, it was the story of America's safest and smoothest ride, a level cruise ride, made possible by the greatest automobile suspension system in the world, torsion air suspension. And this year, something has been added to torsion air. New automatic load-leveling rear air cushions. A combination created exclusively for DeSoto and guaranteeing, as he said, the smoothest ride you've ever taken. Now he was ready to have us get into the car. And the way he handled it, this was the biggest moment yet. The first truly new seat since the automobile was invented. It's called the Sport Swivel Seat. And believe me, it's going to make a big hit with every man, and especially with every woman who rides in an automobile. He was very canny. He invited my wife to get into the front seat. And right away, I saw why. My little woman made just one remark, but I knew it meant a lot. Why didn't somebody think of this before? Well, we were in the car now, but did he start her up? Not right away, he didn't. First, he made his point number 6. The spacious new Fashion Vogue interiors of the '59 DeSoto. Up to 30% more inside room than ever before. I'm telling you, I've never seen a man so enthusiastic about a product in my life. It was real enthusiasm, too. Made me feel this was the greatest car ever built. And I guess it is. Then we started out. And now came point 7 in this master plan of attack. And this was the biggest and best one of all. It was simply demonstration. Because, he felt, the '59 DeSoto can sell itself through demonstration. Soon he had us out on the highway, where he let her out just enough for us to get an idea what a hot potato the DeSoto is. Yet, as he pointed out, it's under perfect control at all times, with that wonderful 100% power steering and those big power brakes. Then he took us out in the country, and I braced myself when he went into a sharp, unbanked turn without slowing up. But that car didn't dip or sway one bit, thanks to torsion air suspension. A little further on, I realized he was following a definite planned route, one with a variety of road conditions, which would show off the car's riding qualities. He was driving us over a real rough road now, one I'd have stayed clear of in my old car. But the way those bumps seemed to flatten out was like magic. That was torsion air again, the finest suspension system in the world. By this time, I was getting restless. I wanted to drive the car myself, and I said so. That was fine with him, so he stopped. Ladies first, dear. Say, can you figure women? I can't. I have to admit it was a wonderful ride. And through it all, that salesman never missed an opportunity to sell us the features of that car. He made every moment count, all right. He pointed out all the automatic features and all the interior styling features. And there were a lot of them, some big and some small. But you can never tell what little thing will put a sale over, especially with a woman. Well, I finally got my turn at the wheel. And believe me, it was worth waiting for. I never handled such a responsive car in my life. And when he told me the horsepower rating, I knew why. By the time we were heading for home, There didn't seem to be another thing that salesman could say. Then he began asking me questions. And when he asked how soon I'd like to have it delivered, I suddenly realized he was asking for the order. In fact, it came to me that his attitude throughout the whole demonstration was that we were going to buy the car. And you know something? I wanted to buy it by that time. But of course I didn't dare let on, not with sugar right there in the back seat. So I got us home as quick as I could. And in a DeSoto, that's pretty quick. I thanked him for the ride, said it was a wonderful car, and I'd think about it. He knew he didn't have many moments left, but he was determined to make the most of them. He tried once more to wrap up the deal. Well, it hurt to do it, but I told him I guessed I wouldn't trade for a while. And what do you think that fella did then? He thanked us for the time we'd given him, and I thought he was leaving. If he had left, well, we might still be driving our old car. But he had one last moment left, and he made it count. He came back with a brochure showing the whole DeSoto line, in case you wanted to think it over further, he said. And then, as he started to turn away, and you could have knocked me down with a truck, I was so surprised, darned if Angel didn't stop him and say, "Could you deliver one that same color by next Monday afternoon?" "But lovely, what about your new coat?" "Don't worry, dear. My old one will last another year." Honest, I just can't figure women. Can you? Well, never mind. Anyway, that was a mighty big moment for me. And for her, too, if I'm any judge of what makes a female give up a new fur coat. And the salesman? Well, his 7 selling steps had really paid off. He'd made every moment count. Could there be a bigger moment than this for him? Yes, maybe so. If I know salesman, it was an even bigger moment when he walked in and put that order on his boss's desk. Yes, sir. For that salesman, I'm sure that was the moment that counted most of all.
An exaggeration? Naturally. But when you set out to put an end to shake, rattle, and rust all the way, it's a good idea to think of them as just that bad. You need new thinking, new engineering. We, Chrysler Corporation, throughout our history, we've been parent and guardian of automotive engineering. The real thing, not just the gimmicks and the chrome, but the real car. The ride and the drive, the power and safety, and the ultimate joy of owning an automobile. We've engineered always toward the car of ultimate silence, strength, and long life. This year, we've got it. For years, car makers bolted a light, flexible body to a heavy but still flexible frame. But we were looking around for ways to do things better, ways that were not necessarily traditional with cars. For example, we admired this kind of bridge. They build it when strength is a problem. When it's all finished, it actually amounts to one piece of metal with three-dimensional rigidity. And we admired some little things, too. We admired the egg. Engineers have always respected the egg as the ideal unit construction, nature's best combination of lightness and strength. We wanted to put wheels on it. Unitized bodies had been built, of course, but they all came equipped with some special problems. One of them, noise. Ordinarily, their unitized shells turned out to be steel drums. They focused noise, all kinds of noise, on the people inside. And the unitized bodybuilders never licked the ugly business of rust. When we commenced planning for the 60s, we needed more than the ordinary tools of the engineering trade. We had problems to solve, and the prize was the perfection we knew could be engineered in a unit body. We knew we could do it. We have a reputation. We've been there first and best more often than any other builder. And now we were pledged for the 60s never to shortchange a design for the sake of time. But something had been happening to time. We were making it happen. We built the Redstone. We built the Jupiter. And we built the mighty Jupiter C that put the first American satellites into orbit. But before the Redstones and Jupiters, we had fired hundreds of others that were never built. We fired them on electronic computers. We fired them with a roar of arithmetic that would have taken us 100 years with pencil and paper. Before we built missiles, we knew them inside and out. And when we did build them, they worked. Now time was on our side. We could speed it up. We could build things 1,000 ways and then pick the best. That was our private breakthrough. We built a body thousands of ways and we picked the best, a design far ahead of any other. It has what a car should have: silence, strength, endurance. And there are things it does not have. Our big idea starts as simply as this. Two pieces of metal can make noise. One can't. We wanted the one-piece 3D strength of the bridge we admired. In simple terms, this kind of bridge. We wanted a body that was a frame, a solid bridge of a car. And on our computers, we built and tried them by the hundreds. We invented a new plastic to use in model making, a plastic that behaves like scale model steel with 1/500th the strength, 500 times the flex. We imitated in miniature the structural designs we liked. We built cars and found out what they could do times 500. We made them one piece with plastic welding. And the welds, too, were 1/500th the strength of welded steel. And we tested them. We applied some scale model twists. We weighted down a front corner and measured minutely the effect on the body. Then we added more weight. Under these exacting conditions, we proved what the computers had told us to expect, a body twice as strong as before. So we went ahead with what we knew was a body that would meet all the demands of the 60s. One unit with a frame flowing into and becoming a part of the body, below and around and up and over. This is our unibody. To build it, we had to rebuild the plants we had, even build new ones. New operations designed from the ground up to build unibody. Designed with conveyors carrying sub-assembled parts to be joined, to be more than joined, to become one, to become unibody. A part, a side, a side. From the left, from the right, come together with the floor pan and are locked in perfect alignment. The giant fixtures tolerate no inaccuracy. The alignment now is right. Unibody alignment that guarantees perfect fit of doors, fenders, hoods, trunk lids. Welded to be perfect now and for the life of the car. They're no longer merely assembled parts. They are one, welded into one body that is stronger than the sum of its parts. Now is the time when we protect their built-in strength. Protected against what?
Rust and leak that make cars weak.
We've stopped leaks. Chrysler Corporation is the first to apply a new liquid gasket, to apply it by automation. Then we heat it up, and it expands once and for all to form the perfect leak-proof seal at each and every joint. And then we lick rust once and for all. It took a lot of inventiveness and a lot of new plant facilities to do it, but the result is worth every bit of it. First of all, we built giant tanks and conveyors to carry the bodies through them. In the tanks are the remarkable chemicals that clean and etch the metal so that it will never part company with the new protective coating we've invented. In the first 6 tanks, 6 separate dips and sprays reach every rust-vulnerable bit of metal. It's a process of etching and rinsing, not once, but several times. The result? A chemically sandpapered surface, ready to take hold of Chrysler Corporation's rust-preventing plastic coating. Now the 7th dip, the one that locks out rust. The plastic coating sheathes the surface. Under, into, over, around every one of the critical spots we used to call rust zones, protecting the body from rust for the life of the car. In our labs, we've tested samples of our plastic coating thousands of times and hundreds of ways, and we've tested the primers that other manufacturers use. Here's one test that says it briefly. A highly concentrated salt solution goes to work on a set of samples, our samples and other people's. Here again, we're turning time ahead, giving these samples 10 years of road life that's rougher than real conditions on the saltiest streets in the world. The good-looking sample in the middle, that's ours. Now, look at something else Unibody does not have. We've licked shake. We licked it first in the mathematics of the computer. We confirmed what we had done in the lab and on the road. We built some electronic roads, the only ones of their kind in the world. We tested body structure, engine mountings, everything that could shake or be shaken. We shook the unibody for all it was worth. Electronically, we tuned it to the solid kind of quietness we wanted. Here's a simple test. That's sand. And this is a perfect imitation of driving on cobblestones. The sand, it stands still. Now the same test on another car. And again, the same imitation of driving over cobblestones. The sand walks right off this fender, and the ride and the quiet of this car cannot match unibodies. So in the 60s, we're done with the weakening effects of rattle, squeak, and shake, and with their annoyance. But that's not all. We're done with annoying road noise, too. We have new kinds of sound insulation, lots of it. Sound-deadening felt pads and fiber blankets that hush the outside noises. And unibody is quiet, limousine quiet, always. But even before you start the engine, you start discovering the wonders of unibody. The crooked A-post, the dogleg in the door pillar, is gone. There's a world of room for getting in and out. No shallow roof or short leg room. No thin seat cushions and awkward doorways. Instead, space. Above, below, in front, and back. Low, modern styling outside, far more room inside. And inside, with no separate frame to accommodate, the floor level provides for higher seats and more legroom than ever before. The first time you drive or ride in any of these cars, you get the happy surprise of realizing all by yourself that something new and remarkable has happened in the automobile business. You don't have to be told. It's not window dressing, but solid, comfortable, quiet reality. It doesn't need explanation. Our Proving Grounds drivers knew it with the first touch of the accelerator, and they kept rediscovering it with every quiet mile they drove. And most of their miles are far from quiet. They discovered that the incredible match that was engineered between unibody and torsionaire is something no one can fail to recognize. The long, velvet stride of torsionaire that floats our really quiet cars over any road. We rolled up 100,000. We rolled up another. And the answers were there even before the test cars came in for their final exams. Did they come in looking like some of these familiar 50,000-mile veterans? No, sir. Our cars came in proudly, strong, quiet. After 200,000 miles of highways and the Proving Grounds special kinds of torment in every sort of climate, unibody was unbeaten. The test cars were young, but they were victorious veterans. Among them, they had piled up 1,000,000 miles, 200,000 for this one. Hundreds of it on wet and heavily salted roads. No sign of rust. So this was it, a body that in the lifetime of the car won't let an owner complain. And after 200,000 miles, what about vibration? What about shake? There isn't any. We tried the sand business again. Visual proof that unibody is still the same solid unit when it's 200,000 miles old. Rattles and squeaks? Well, we took her pulse. We tried hard with electronic stethoscopes to find noises the miles had not produced. Unibody wrote its own testimonials, wrote them on the machinery in the lab. And that was that. What's the payoff? For most people, it starts with the first ride, the first drive. It starts quietly, and it goes on quietly for a long, long time. We've tried to describe to ourselves the feel of these cars. all of us have. The engineers, the drivers, and others whose interests are not technical at all. And what we say is nearly always the same. You have never been in a solid car before. You have never felt this kind of quiet independence from the road. It's easy to feel, and it's easy to sell.
Gentlemen, so far today you've heard the national economy story for 1960. And also let me say to you that we have increased our production schedule of quality cars to meet the demands of that big market. You've also heard the demands for the cars in Plymouth's price class are a great big stable 56% of that business. You've also seen a demonstration on the technique for qualifying prospects. And I'm sure that you are just as aware as we are of the tremendous public interest today in economy. Now, taking all of these things together, I'm sure you'll have to admit that we've got a pretty sharp, clear idea of the job ahead. But let's get into that economy story. All the research that we've conducted, and every bit of the competitive research that we've been able to get our hands on, shows us that never before has the motoring public been so economy conscious as they are today. And by the way, this includes all price classes, not just the compact car class. Now, sure, the public knows all about the mobile gas economy runs, and we're proud that Plymouth has won this year after year, and I might say we intend to win it again this year. But you know, all of these sponsored runs are driven by professional drivers. The public, well, they're really not a tangible part of it. They can't interpret what these mileage figures actually mean as far as their type of driving is concerned. So with the interest of economy at an all-time peak, we've been looking for a way to get your prospect back of the wheel and let that prospect experience Plymouth's economy in person. Gentlemen, I believe that we have exactly the plan to do it, because we have a marketing plan that, in my opinion, is one of the most forward steps in merchandising automobiles that Plymouth has ever attempted. And right now, I want to show you how the public's going to learn about this marketing innovation. This newspaper advertisement, which will appear clear across the country, will be used to explain and kick off this great campaign the first week of February. Plymouth Prove It Yourself Economy Drive lets you prove Plymouth's gas economy at your dealers now. You take the wheel, you do the driving, you prove for yourself how the solid Plymouth gives you more miles per gallon. Notice, gentlemen, how the ad says, others talk gas savings, but Plymouth lets you prove it. And here's all you do. Go to your Plymouth dealer and take the wheel of a solid 60 Plymouth. You do the driving the way you always drive. The economy meter mounted at the side shows the gas you use down to the last fraction of a gallon. Test for yourself how slowly that gas level goes down. You use only a few teacups full of fuel. Then compare the mileage figures on the speedometer. And gentlemen, your prospects are in for a very pleasant surprise. Here's the gas saving you've been looking for, with all the easy riding comfort of the big, roomy Plymouth. No need to stint on size to get big mileage now. Get full-size savings in a full-size car. Try it today. Solid Plymouth 1960. There, gentlemen, is the kickoff ad for a great, bold, daring campaign. Gentlemen, that is the public announcement of a marketing promotion that we feel will generate a lot more benefits than are obvious at first glance. But let me say this campaign is big, it's bold, it's unique, it's dramatic, and it's also confident. And more important, much more important, this campaign is different from anything else that we or anybody else has ever done on a national scale. It's going to build a lot more than showroom traffic. I'm sure you'll remember the Big Difference promotion that we had last year. Well, the Plymouth Prove It Yourself Economy Drive promotion is going to be a whole lot bigger. How much? Not twice as big, but no less than 3 times as big in action, in pulling power, and more important, in results than anything we've ever done. But gentlemen, the key to the success of this whole promotion are you salesmen sitting right out there. Now, to help you, we've developed many merchandising assists in this entire program. One of them is designed to show you exactly how to conduct an economy drive such as the one we're talking about. I'm sure you gentlemen are all familiar with Pete Hansen, who represents us so very well on our TV show every Monday night. Now, Pete was quite concerned that he know exactly how to tell this story to the millions of people. So Pete came back to Detroit because as a good salesman, a sincere salesman, he wanted to know the facts about this Plymouth Prove It Yourself Economy Drive. When Pete came into Detroit, we put him in touch with one of the men who is probably most responsible for the great economy that is built into the solid 60 Plymouth. And that was our chief engineer, Jack Charapar. I'm going to ask you gentlemen to watch very carefully and see the way that Jack Charapar not only presents the Prove It Yourself package, but Jack also takes full advantage of the opportunity to tell the complete story of the great solid Plymouth for 1960. Watch him.
Well, that's the story, Mr. Charapar. If I'm going to sell Plymouth's Prove It Yourself Economy Drive on the air, I've got to know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think we can explain that, Mr. Hansen. But first, would you please call me Jack, and may I call you Pete?
Well, it's fine with me. Look, before we start, you probably know what's been going on in television and radio. Is this test rigged?
Well, no, but the cars do have to be properly conditioned. Here, let me show you what I mean.
Fine.
Naturally, every Plymouth dealer and salesman will want to be sure that his car is delivering the economy that was designed into it. That involves some very simple, yet effective preparation. First of all, the car has to be properly broken in to make sure that the rolling friction is at minimum.
Now, that makes sense.
In addition, brakes should be adjusted to make certain that they're not dragging. Wheel alignment should be precise to make sure the tires aren't being forced laterally along the road. Even new tires, by the way, have high rolling resistance, should be broken in with the car. And of course, they should be inflated to recommended pressures.
That's wonderful. Getting a capsule engineering course.
Not quite. But this is the preparation we recommend if the car is to deliver the kind of performance that was designed into it. Perfect engine tune is another item if the engine's to contribute its part to the overall economy story. For example, carburetor, ignition, distributor should all be set to recommended factory settings. After that, the car is all set for the installation of the mileage meter.
That's that jar up there.
Right. It's connected right here at the fuel line at the carburetor. The kit contains simple instructions. Installation takes only about 10 minutes. Okay, Pete, get behind the wheel and we'll do a dry run.
A dry run?
Yes. I'd like to take you through every step of the procedure. Then, if you'd like, we'll go out on the road and actually do a live test.
Oh, fine.
Good.
Oh, look, why don't we assume that I'm a prospect and I'm going to take the economy drive?
Very good. Well, first of all, Pete, you'd probably not like that cigarette. For safety, the salesman should caution against smoking in the test car.
Okay, no smoking.
Fine. Then before we start to measure miles, we let the prospect drive a while, about 5 minutes.
Why is that?
Well, it gives the engine a chance to warm up, and the rest of the car, too. And make sure the test isn't run with the automatic choke partially on.
That's an important point to remember, and to explain to the prospect, too, huh?
Right. Now, at this point, the salesman should start coaching the prospect on ways and means of getting the most mileage on his run.
You mean caution him against such things as jackrabbit starts?
Exactly. And tell him that if he stretches that fuel with easy, steady action on the pedal and avoids quick stops and starts, he'll get a lot more mileage. You save fuel, too, by judging the traffic pattern ahead, keeping your eye on stoplights so that you can time them to keep a steady speed on through. Or as a second choice, coast into them. Slow down without braking, then come back up to speed. Easy. It's just a matter of anticipating the traffic conditions and driving accordingly. I'd certainly call his attention to the fuel that's wasted as a result of hard braking. And right now, of course, is a good time to get in a plug on the safety of Plymouth's total contact brakes with the 2 hydraulic cylinders in front, where most of the stopping is done. A Plymouth exclusive in its field.
And of course, torsion air suspension makes all stops and starts flat and level without dip or dive.
Sure. But the main thing to get across is the point that stops, especially hard stops, waste fuel, because you have to get your car back up to speed. And it takes more fuel to do that than to cruise at a steady pace.
Seems to me those are all good driving hints any prospect would appreciate.
I would say so. Well, now let's assume we have the car properly warmed up. Now we're ready to start the test.
That's fine. That's what I want to find out about.
Oh, here's something I forgot about.
Oh, what's that?
It's a special booklet the salesman gives to the prospect before he leaves the dealership. The booklet explains just what the Plymouth Prove-It-Yourself economy drive is and how it works. It tells about how the quart container is used to actually measure 1 quart of fuel to the engine during the drive. The center sections of the folder tell the reasons why the 30-day Economy 6 is so economical.
I see the Fury V800, the Golden Commando, and the Sonoramic Commando are also featured here.
Then down here are spaces in which the starting mileage and the finishing mileage are filled in. The first figure is subtracted from the second to show the mileage traveled for 1 quart of fuel. Then that's multiplied by 4 and entered in this space to show the mileage that would be obtained if a gallon of fuel were used.
That's pretty good. What's on the back here?
Back there, it tells about all the advantages of Plymouth's DuraQuiet unibody, the rust protection, which means more economy in still another way, and all about Plymouth's comfort.
And I see we've got gas mileage tips, too.
Yes, these are essentially the fuel-saving tips I've been telling you about. Now, with the engine fully warmed up, you fill the test container. It's done by turning this fuel switch, located on the instrument panel. First, it's set to fill with the car stopped, but with the engine idling. This fills the test container with exactly 1 quart of fuel. When the container is full to the top, so that the fuel is just passing out the overflow pipe, the switch is set to test. In this position, the measured quart of fuel is being fed to the engine. The prospect starts his test drive with a switch in this position. He drives until the quart of fuel is exhausted. This is shown in the test jar the instant the fuel level passes out of sight down the supply tube. When this happens, the salesman does 2 things. First, he turns the fuel switch to run. The car engine would die if the switch were left in the test position after the jar is empty, since it cuts off all gas from the tank. Then the salesman asks the prospect to read aloud the odometer mileage, which the salesman enters in the folder. If the starting mileage was 2,702.8 miles, and the mileage at the end of the test were 2,708.4, and the mileage obtained on a quart of fuel is the starting mileage subtracted from the finishing mileage. In this case, it's 5.6 miles for a quart of fuel. Multiplied by 4, that makes 22.4 miles, the mileage that would be obtained on 1 gallon of fuel.
Jack, that's terrific. Yeah, I'd like to take this test out on the road.
We will in just a minute, Pete. But after the prospect makes his economy drive and we've logged his mileage, then we tell him to try Plymouth's performance. We never mix the Prove-It-Yourself economy drive with a demonstration of performance. For obvious reasons, the two just don't go together. Now that you've had your dry run, Pete, let's go out on the road and see what kind of mileage you can actually record. Now, Pete, it's preferable to have the engine warmed up before the drive begins. Then a few miles of driving will warm up the tires and the rest of the chassis. These These miles can bring the salesman to his pre-selected test route, which should include typical driving conditions. Let's pull over here, Pete, and start your test. Now, as I explained before, we first turn the fuel switch to the fill position. You can fill the jar and start the drive while the car's underway if you wish. Whether the drive is started from a stop, as we're doing, or the car underway, always record the mileage before switching to test. The jar is full when the fuel begins to run out the overflow pipe. With the jar full, we switch to test and begin the economy drive. Remember, Pete, easy does it. This is no place for jackrabbit starts or panic stops. And remember the other good driving tips, too. The average drive will take about 10 minutes. The prospect may want to try it more than once to improve his score. This gives him more actual driving experience with a new Plymouth, too, and gives the retail salesman a good opportunity to describe the quiet, solid feel of the new Plymouth. The salesman keeps an eye on the fuel level in the fuel jar. And when the jar, including cap, is empty, the salesman turns the fuel switch to run. He jots down the odometer mileage and figures the score. And now, Pete, let's take your score back to the office.
Boy, Jack, that's a terrific demonstration.
It is, Pete. Now I'd like you to write down the score you just recorded on this wall chart here. All Plymouth dealers will have one of these on display so prospects can see how friends and neighbors did on their economy drive.
That's a good idea, but just between you and me, Jack, wouldn't anyone get a good fuel mileage score if they started out with a well-prepared car and drove as carefully as you showed me how to?
Sure he would, Pete. But as a Plymouth salesman, I could tell you that with the same conditions, and regardless of the score you achieve, you went farther on that quart of fuel in the Plymouth than you could have in any other six-cylinder car in Plymouth's class. Now let me show you why Plymouth 30D6 delivers top economy. When a Plymouth salesman raises the hood on a new Plymouth 6, he's showing his prospect something that prospect has never seen before. The newest 6 in its field, and the only new 6 in the industry in the last 7 years. It's the one engine with the economy story right out in plain sight. With inclined design, we've been able to provide room to make the intake manifold passages longer. And here's what that means. In an intake manifold, the carburetor positioned here distributes fuel-air mixture through these branches to the individual ports on the cylinder. The problem, it's a classic problem in manifold design, I might add, is to get this carburetor to supply the same mixture to all the cylinders in a line. With a typical conventional intake manifold of the kind exemplified here by Chevrolet and Ford, we see that the manifold branches are of very unequal length. The result, the mixture requirements of the individual cylinders in the line are not the same. Problem, the carburetor has to be adjusted to deliver the richest mixture required by the cylinders in sequence. Result, reduced fuel economy. Not so with the Plymouth 30D Economy 6 manifold. For here you see the manifold branches are of more nearly equal length, and the result is we can tune the carburetor for more performance and economy by adjusting its mixture to suit the requirements of all the cylinders, which are far more nearly equal. Another thing, you notice here there are 6 individual intake manifold ports and branches in the 30D Economy 6 manifold. This is true on the exhaust side as well. 12 ports in all. In addition, note the length of these manifold branches. This length actually gives us semi-ram induction, or power tuning in the upper speed ranges. You can also compare the configuration of these branches and see the minimal flow restriction imposed by this kind of manifold. These are just some of the reasons why the others can't touch the economy and performance designed into the 30D Economy 6 manifold.
It's a great economy story, Jack.
I think so, too. Here's an easy way for the Plymouth retail salesman to remember this part of the 30D story, if he thinks of it in terms of the 3 E's. Equal length intake manifold passages for equal mixture to each cylinder, and that spells economy in capital letters. In addition, this manifold is aluminum.
Hey, that's light, isn't it?
It runs cooler and permits the engine to develop more power from each fuel charge.
Let me look at this on the car again.
All right.
You know, Jack, I think we could build a TV commercial around that.
I'll bet you could. And the beauty of this is that the Plymouth salesman can show it to his prospect right here. In addition, there are many other features that make our 6s more economical and more efficient. And all of these superiorities and many others apply not only to the 6, but to the 8s as well. For example, a 3-stage metering rod in the carburetor, where others use only a 2-stage rod. And of course, our famous thermal flywheel automatic choke, both of which go together to tune the engine for maximum efficiency, whether you're starting or driving, at any speed. Fuel economy is directly proportional to compression ratio. Our compression ratio is higher than either Ford or Chevrolet. This gives us more economy. And of course, more compression ratio means more power out of every fuel charge. And we get all this on regular fuel. Another thing, Pete, Plymouth axle ratios are lower than those of Chevrolet and Ford. This means slower engine speed, or more economy and longer engine life. There's another factor that's very important in overall car economy picture. It's aerodynamics. I think few people realize that the average automobile at modest speeds, say 50 miles an hour, is spending half of its engine power, and that means half of its gasoline, just overcoming wind resistance. I have a chart here that shows you what I mean. It shows the horsepower required to propel a car at any speed. Here's how it works. First, to make a car roll at any speed, we must overcome rolling resistance. This takes a certain amount of power and gasoline. At 30 miles per hour, for example, the cars in our field use as much as 5 horsepower just to overcome rolling resistance. This rolling resistance is the power used to overcome friction in the bearings, seals, the transmission, and the tires, to name just a few of the items. This figure is essentially the same for Plymouth, Ford, and Chevrolet. At 60 miles per hour, it takes double the power, or about 10 horsepower, to overcome rolling resistance. Now, if rolling resistance were the only factor to overcome in moving an automobile, today's cars would have fantastic top speeds, perhaps in the neighborhood of 250 to 300 miles per hour, and they deliver fantastic fuel economy, too. But we know the reason they don't. The reason is that an automobile has to be pushed through the air. This takes power. In conventional cars, such as Chevrolet and Ford, this is the amount of power required to overcome air resistance, just to push them through the air. At about 40, for example, and at speeds above 40, it takes as much power to overcome air drag as it does just to make the car roll. In conventional cars, this air drag becomes the major factor in determining the power and the gasoline required to propel the car. Of course, the more power required at a given speed, the less economy that car will deliver. Now here is the Plymouth curve. It shows graphically the lower horsepower required to propel a Plymouth through the air. You can translate Plymouth's lower air drag into greater economy at all speeds. Here at 65 miles per hour, for example, Ford and Chevrolet require 30 horsepower to overcome air drag. Plymouth uses only 23 at the same speed. The Plymouth is obviously delivering greater economy and has a greater performance reserve. The engine isn't working as hard either, and it'll deliver longer engine life than the other two cars. Now, why should Plymouth have lower wind resistance?
Well, I think I know one reason, Jack. You're an aeronautical engineer, too, aren't you?
Yes, I am, Pete. Let me show you a few examples of how we apply aerodynamics to Plymouth body design. In addition to being the most durable and solid body construction in its field, Plymouth's DuraQuiet unibody gives us a smooth bottom to our car so that the air can flow cleanly under it as well as around it and over it. And in other important design areas, such as the front fenders, hood, grille, and bumpers, we've developed the surfaces carefully for minimum drag. This smart front wheel opening, for example, and this fairing behind the headlight let the air bleed cleanly off the front of the car for minimum restriction. Plymouth's windshield and these smart moldings that ornament it, also unique in their field, help greatly to reduce wind noise and roar in the Plymouth.
I notice when you're driving, there's a lot less wind roar.
That's right, Pete. It's just another evidence of the fact that in this car, you're not pushing a big wall of air ahead of you. Now, the front of the car should part the air cleanly with minimum restriction. And at the rear, the idea is to restore the air just about the way it was before the car appeared on the scene. The slant of this rear glass is designed to do just that. Its surface flows cleanly from the roof down into the rear deck. And this depressed channel between the fin and the rear deck to conduct the slipstream smoothly back into the wake of the car for minimum turbulence and air drag.
Well, Jack, that's only part of Plymouth's fin story, isn't it?
Right. I guess everyone's familiar with the steering wheel fight you get in a strong crosswind. The car wobbles with each gust and wants to take off or turn with the wind. Well, a few years ago, we designed a car that nullified absolutely the effects of crosswinds. Instead of turning with the crosswind, this particular car
Oh, wow.
the experimental A498 had a slight tendency to turn into the wind. It was a delightful car to drive because of its wonderful directional stability.
Jack, did these big fins give you that stability?
Yes, they did, Pete. But then a fin this size just isn't practical. So on our Plymouth, we have modified fins. If we were to cut them off and have only as much fin effect as Ford and Chevrolet have, it would be like cutting the fin off this weather vane. And our Plymouth would buffet around in crosswinds like Ford and Chevrolet do. But with the fin area Plymouth has, you can feel the big handling difference in crosswinds at the Plymouth wheel.
You know, I've noticed driving my Plymouth on the freeway in a heavy crosswind, there's very little steering effort needed to maintain direction.
That's right. So Plymouth fins provide two important advantages. One, they make for a smoother airflow over the rear of the car. And two, they minimize wind wander in crosswinds by improving the directional stability of the car.
I never realized there was so much to talk about in fins.
Actually, many people think of them only as a styling feature, and they are. But they do function, and you can tell the difference in a single ride. Pete, I'd like to show you some of the things we've been talking about on Chevrolet and Ford.
Fine. Well, the first thing that strikes me, Ford and Chevy are lookalikes this year. Of the three, I'd say Plymouth is far and away the most distinctive.
That's right. And neither Chevrolet or Ford can boast anything like unibody. Pete, did you know that Plymouth's body structure in 1960 is over 60% stronger and more rigid than the structures of either Chevrolet or Ford? This is what we mean when we say solid for 60, quiet and rigid, and kept that way for a long lifetime of trouble-free service by our new 7-dip rust-proofing system. Look here, Pete. This is high-drag design, Pete. There's no relief for the wall of air being pushed along ahead of this car. And that's soaking up horsepower and gasoline, and that means less economy.
I don't see any way for the wind to get out of there.
There isn't any. And the same thing applies to little protuberances like the door handles and these ornaments, and the major items like the body sections and bulbous character lines in the sides of these cars. The sharp changes of direction the airflow must assume in passing over the roof and down over the rear deck on both of these cars accounts to a great extent for their higher air drag and lower overall efficiency and economy. And then when you consider that the Chevrolet 6 engine in basic form began way back in 1937, and that the engine under this hood is 8 years old, it's not too amazing that the Plymouth 6 should be the all-time economy winner in its class. And here's something else. For the Plymouth owner who wants economy with convenience, Plymouth is really out in front this year with the newest, lightest automatic transmission in the industry, Torque Flight 6, with 3 speeds for more economy and performance. You think that's enough of a story for your television presentation?
Enough? Jack, I can't tell you how glad I am to have been able to get this story firsthand. You've given me a great background, not only for selling Plymouth's prove-it-yourself economy drive, but, well, all the other Plymouth commercials that will be coming my way as well. Speaking of coming my way, how about your coming out to California sometime? Doing one of these on the air.
There you see what I mean. This prove-it-yourself campaign not only brings them in, but as you saw, it gives you, the salesman, a great opportunity to demonstrate the car and to tell the complete story. And then, gentlemen, after you've given them the drive and the prospect card, you bring them back in and get them to register their personal mileage score and also to sign their names on the wall chart. Now, at the same time, they will also see how some of the other people, probably in the same neighborhood, did. If they find that they're competing with a friend or a neighbor, that's great. But the big point is this: where are they? They're right near, well, at least they're close to the closing room. You see what I mean? I think you do. Now, I don't want to contradict myself. Today, economy is important, but let's face it, it's not the only thing that sells cars. So as a salesman, you as a professional salesman, you've got to tell a complete story. As a professional salesman, you can see actually what we're doing with this campaign. We're using economy, let's say, as an attractive device, and it's a great one, to get people to listen to our complete sales story. And more importantly to you and to him, to get them to listen to you during that all-important demonstration drive. You know, earlier in this movie, you saw a couple of sales aids that were used by Jack Cherapar and Pete Hansen. I've shown you a few minutes ago our announcement newspaper ad. And before you leave this room today, you'll see all the advertising and sales promotion material needed to make this campaign a great success. I'd like to take just a minute here and talk about a subject which every man in this room is vitally interested in, and I'm talking about prospects. Prospects, conquest sales. You know, in 1959, we had 2 direct mail campaigns designed for prospecting. First, last spring, we had a Big Difference campaign. And with that campaign, you received individual prospect cards for every individual name on the direct mail list. And then a little later on, we followed that up with another direct mail campaign at announcement time. It, too, was designed to bring Plymouth owners into your dealership. By the way, your reactions to both of those campaigns were very encouraging. You'll also recall that last year when we sent out the direct mail, we gave you the names of prospects in your selling area. And they were the names of all of the 56 and 57 Plymouth owners, plus the names of all the 56 and 57 Ford and Chevrolet station wagon owners. And that mailing amounted to about 1.5 million names. Now, in 1960, we're going to mail and you're going to receive prospect cards carrying the names of not just the station wagon owners, but names of all 1957 and 1958 Ford owners, the 1957 and 58 Plymouth owners, and also all the 1957 Chevrolet owners. Now, as I said, last year we sent direct mail to 1.5 million people, and that's quite a lot of people. But this year, we're boosting that total by 275%. That means that there will be more than 4 million direct mail invitations going out to more than 4 million hand-picked prospects who are owners of Fords, Chevrolets, and Plymouths. And remember that these 4 million car owners, who, like everybody else today, are very much in that economy-minded class. But that's not all. The first mailing will be followed by a second 4 million plus mailing. Again, these mailings will go to those same hand-picked prospects. Now, this makes a total of more than 8 million pieces of direct mail that's going to invite the prospect into your place of business. And speaking of your place of business, you realize, of course, that this year we have 30% fewer dealerships handling Plymouth. So your total will not be twice but 4 times as great as it was last year. You'll have 4 times as many prospect names. And remember, these are the names of qualified prospects who are in that big 56% of the buying market class. Now, these mailings will have 2 strong appeals. Appeal number 1 is premiums. You remember how popular the premiums were at announcement time. Well, we're going to parlay that popularity and appeal by giving a different twist. The result will still be one that has more punch and more polling power, more sales results. You'll hear more about that a little later. Now for appeal number 2. It is based on the natural and psychological urge to step up to a challenge. And our challenge, of course, is to prove it to yourself. Prove it to yourself that Plymouth economy of operation is something that is not just reserved for the professional test driver in a national race. So all of these direct mail pieces that will be going out to all of these millions of prospects will carry the additional appeal of a challenging, enticing, fun invitation to come into your dealership and prove Plymouth's economy story firsthand. Gentlemen, this is a tremendously powerful tool for going out after conquest sales. And you have a real great complete package. Now let's recall this. First, we are entering an economic era that the experts describe as the sizzling, the exploding, the selling 60s. Second, we have the best car in our history. It's designed with a primary appeal to today's economy-minded car-buying public. The third point refers to our position in the car market and the fact that 56% of that market is still dedicated to buying cars in the Plymouth price class. And fourth, we're going out to strengthen our position in that market with the most exciting, stimulating, and novel merchandising campaign in our history. And finally, we're backing that great promotion with $1 million plus prospect building direct mail campaign that is second to none in the history of our whole corporation. And I might say to you that that's just the beginning. But let's remember this. The key to the success of all of this, gentlemen, is right in your hands. It rests with the way that you use the names on those prospect cards and turn those names into people and those people into sales. Remember, these are logical prospects who have the money to buy and are already settled in that 56% of the market. So, gentlemen, it's up to you. You have something else. We have it. We have it together. We have a brand new fighting spirit, a competitive spirit that is already making itself felt in every state in the land. But it's up to you and I to back up that spirit with action, hard-hitting professional action that takes advantage of every tool we have, that takes advantage of every bit of professional skill that you and I can command to do the kind of a selling job that I know you gentlemen out there can do.
For people who love to drive, the renowned engineers of Chrysler Corporation designed the Chrysler 300, America's highest performance automobile. To describe and demonstrate the 300 for 1960, the 300F, here is Bob Roger, Chief Engineer of the Chrysler Imperial Division of Chrysler Corporation.
I'm Bob Roger. I suppose you have all wondered from time to time just how and where an automobile design starts. As an engineer, I can tell you it starts with a question. Just who are the people we are designing this car for? Well, in the case of the 300F, we did have a particular group of people in mind. They are sportsmen. They're the type of people who like the feel of a fine machine, the throb of a powerful engine, like this one, that will take them anywhere they want to go. They like a feeling of oneness with their machine, a feel of the road. They like the ability to be able to snake their way through any traffic, around any turns. And I think if you're one of these people, you will appreciate what we mean when we show you some of the features that make this possible in the Chrysler 300F. From an external appearance, we want to achieve the psychological effect of this image of power and performance, of functionalness. We do this with a single massive air intake opening, a minimum of ornamentation, and a minimum of chrome moldings. Now for a moment, imagine yourself as driver of this automobile, and notice how this magnificent, unusual interior contributes to the overall theme of a functional, high-performance car. You'll notice a thrill of anticipation of things to come just in the appearance of these 4 individual bucket seats. And as a driver, you'll appreciate the convenience of swivel seats in entering a contoured chair-type seat. Once in place, the driver realizes that these seats aren't just appearance. They aren't just window dressing. You feel the luxury of 4 inches of solid foam and the shape of the seat contouring you and holding you in comfort and safety. Notice down the center of this car, the instrument console provides a mounting for an armrest that adds to the feeling of security, as well as a place for an ash receiver, window controls, and note too the tachometer mechanically attached to the engine that registers engine speed. Our instrument panel is the new Astrodome type with electroluminescent lighting. This provides for increased safety in night driving because there's less glare from the instrument panel. The numbers and decoration of the panel are lights in themselves. You know, to get the feel of this automobile and the thrill, you really have to drive it. Now, speaking of driving, let me make one point perfectly clear. The sportsman who buys this type of car wants a geared-to-the-road feel. This is accomplished in the 300F with a firm suspension. That is, heavy-duty springs and shock absorbers. You won't get a baby buggy ride in the 300F, but you will get one that gives you a feeling of security and a sense of safety in all types of driving conditions. But, of course, the story in the 300 is the engine. Of course, everyone expects unlimited power from a 300. And this machine really has it. You know, as long as I've worked on this 300 engine, I still get a tingle every time we open the hood. And you will too. In here we have 413 cubic inches, fed by a brand new induction system. What you see here are 2 oversized 4-barrel carburetors on opposite sides of this engine compartment. Fed through long cast tubes across the engine compartment from the carburetor to the opposite bank is the air-fuel mixture. The theory here is to utilize an open induction system together with the inertia of a pipe full of air and fuel mixture and a sonic wave to crowd the most possible air-fuel mixture into each cylinder. We have an exhaust system with very large manifolding exhaust pipes, mufflers, and tailpipes. The camshaft itself is a race variety camshaft to give maximum output in the higher speed ranges. The engine itself develops, as a result of the ram manifolding, a peak torque that's about 15% higher than a normal engine of this displacement, and it develops it at a speed range where it can be best used for hill climbing and passing purposes. The development of the 300F was a big job. But it's not really a job, it's sort of a hobby with the engineers. We've had a lot of fun building, trying out, testing. And at our proving grounds at Chelsea, Michigan, probably no other cars that we have made have put in more time being tried and changed and tried again. Admittedly, this was something all of us enjoyed. I remember one sort of rainy day in particular when I finally turned over one of the development models to one of our best track drivers, Ralph Lockridge, with the instructions only to let her out After Ralph had warmed her up on the big oval track, I timed his second go-around. Drivers like Lockridge are specialists, craftsmen. The sound of the tires in this high-bank concrete, the feel of the steering wheel at each speed, tell them more about a car in a few minutes than most of us can discover in a whole day. That's because they relate every new driving experience to hundreds of thousands of other test miles they've driven. And with Ralph Lockridge and every other driver who got his hands on her, the 300F was a love affair. When Lockridge brought her in from the Oval that day, his satisfaction was, if you'll forgive our boasting, tremendous. The handling, that special road clinging that the 300s do in any old situation, the resolute track speed, everything. Much more even than we had predicted. And we had predicted a lot. The same day, we reran a lot of acceleration tests, competitive tests with the 300E, the 1959 model of the 300, here in the foreground. We switched drivers back and forth so that an extra heavy foot on one accelerator wouldn't deceive us. I gave him the count. The lead the 300F takes is the result of ram manifolding. We've got some grades at our proving grounds, grades that we built into our back 40 with real surgical precision, intended, in fact, to take the spirit out of most cars. Our drivers knew what we wanted, fair, accurate acceleration tests. We put the 300E and the 300F together again in competition. And so, time and again, the count. And time and again, the reward for a year's labor of love. The proving ground is a wonderful place for running controlled tests, as you've seen. We can do things there that you just can't do out on the busy highways. On the other hand, it has its limitations too, because there are driving situations that occur on the highways, different types of roads, and heavy traffic that we cannot duplicate on the proving ground. This experience, of course, is important to the development of any new car, and we get it. From the Chrysler plant in Detroit, the development cars go looking for it. They go out nearly every day, and they log thousands of miles of town and country, all the places people drive. The 300s are city-minded as well as sports-minded. Give them a stoplight, and when it turns green, they'll be away from it and up to lawful speed before anything else on the road, American or foreign-born. Give them an expressway, and their drivers are where they want to be, at speed, up ahead, safely in the lead. Or give them any country or suburban road, rough or smooth, and they're ready. Readier and more capable than any other car. Give them the offbeat stretches, and they give you back the romance of driving. Because the 300F is an engineering hobby. Give them the less certain routes of twilight, when driver and machine probably have more dependence upon one another for everyone's safety. And the 300s and their drivers team up automatically in a confidence of highway motion that isn't equaled anywhere. Or give them the clutter of the small town at holiday time, and you find out what exceptional unity of man and machine has been achieved. Give them dusk to dawn driving as we did this car, and you'll find the driver still alert. because the elaborate convenience of the 300's controls make his job most efficient. There's a new kind of communication between man and machine. Give them the high country and give them any kind of weather, such as here in the Smoky Mountains. And the 300F's bright new notions of suspension, power, torque, balance and handling all give back to the driver not merely security, but the certainty, the thrill of being in full command. Or take the favorite justification of horsepower, the need to pass another vehicle safely, quickly, and to get promptly back into lane. No car can match the 300 here. In steep places or flat ones, it is almost never necessary to kick the transmission into a lower range. Get off the beaten path in a 300F. You'll find yourself hoping almost immediately that more paths will stay unbeaten. Handle the 300F as we have, over thousands of miles of the most miserable gravel and ruts, and you're bound to join a fair number of us who are engineers and test drivers in our special enthusiasm for the 300's firm, sure-footed version of torsionary suspension. I think we've made the scenic back roads fun to drive with a car that's yours to steer or navigate. We sent a cameraman along on this particular southern route, looking, of course, for tough and scenic places, and assigned to wind up in Florida at Daytona Beach. The car was a test model. When building a car with the performance characteristics of this one, it's unavoidable that some of these sportsmen will want to enter the car in competitive events. As a Chrysler Corporation, of course, we do not participate in this sort of activity. However, at Daytona, one of our Chrysler Imperial dealers, Brewster Shaw, is a sports car enthusiast. Brewster himself has set a lot of records of various sorts on the famous sands at Daytona, and we agreed to let him give one of the early 300Fs a workout. If we were eager to hear the results, Brewster Shaw was just as eager to do the driving. He didn't give the new 300 more than 10 seconds rest before he took off for the beach. At the famous measured mile, Shaw had scheduled the NASCAR timing authorities for 2 different trials. The first was to be the flying mile. In the flying mile, a car is allowed a couple of miles distance to run up to its maximum speed before crossing the start line, at which the timing of 1 precise mile begins. The results of Brewster Shaw's flying mile runs here in this mecca of performance trials were more than we had anticipated, and more than Shaw had, too. Then he tried the standing mile over the same route. Precisely 1 mile from a standing start in the sand. A real test of the capability of a machine to accelerate quickly in the skilled hands of a good manager. And once more, the 300F had proven itself. Perhaps such things are triumphs chiefly in the eyes of sportsmen. or sports car enthusiasts, but they're also potent demonstrations of the obedience and responsiveness of a great driving machine. Naturally, no record attempt was made with this particular automobile on the sand. It, of course, was equipped for road cruising and was not tuned for this type of competition. For the real competitor, we do have something in the way of a goodie for the 1960 300. This consists of a special high-output 400 horsepower engine with a special race cam and mechanical valve gear, headers, an oversized dual exhaust system, and what you would like to hear, behind this package is a 4-speed manual shift full synchronization gearbox. Well, now you've heard the story of the 300F, a story of magnificent power and performance. But to really appreciate it, you have to drive it.
I wouldn't recommend trying this with your own car or demonstrator, but we want you to know how tough this car really is, how it can take it. The 300's a new top performance car at a popular price. They asked some of us test drivers at the Chrysler Proving Grounds to give it a rough performance workout, and hey, I look pretty good in a crash helmet, don't I? You can't tell I'm losing my hair. We put this 300 through the works. The roughest, toughest performance test possible. But the big thing we wanted to find out was how it stacks up against competition, like the BOP cars, Buick Invicta, old Super 88, and Pontiac Bonneville. The game was follow the leader, and I was the leader in the 300. Now, these are all good cars, 62s in the same price range. Big, powerful performers with standard engines over 300 horsepower. So the game was for keeps. It was up to the 300 to prove itself the leader. They kept the cameras grinding on us, including a camera and a helicopter hovering overhead. Well, we ran these cars to their limits, and sometimes a little more. Nothing was rigged, nothing special was done to any of the cars. They came right from the dealers. Anybody can duplicate these tests with 4 experienced drivers. You're going to see for yourself just how the Chrysler 300 stacks up.
just a sample of what you're going to see. We'll show you more details in a few minutes. That's me on the left in the 300, then the Invicta, Super 88, and Bonneville. It's a drag race, 0 to 60, and I'll wave my handkerchief when I get to 60 so you'll know.
Are you ready?
Here we go.
Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There, less than 10 seconds. The 300 takes off like a rocket that's late for a countdown. Though Buick brags about advanced thrust and Olds about its performance transmission, look who has the edge every time. To thoroughly check the 300's exceptional dig-out power, we also tried it on wet pavement. Even if you don't go in for drag racing, fast acceleration's important. For instance, for swinging into expressway traffic safely. Also for passing, so we check that too. A truck paced us at 25 miles an hour. Then at the flag, we all floored it. That's me on the left pulling away from the bops, including the Olds with its exceptionally authoritative passing gear. Now let's get on to reserve acceleration power for heavy loads and trailers and for hills, like this steep 32% grade. The 300 will take them on one at a time, starting with the Super 88. We'll approach at 25, then at the flag, give it all she's got, and see how fast we can claw our way up. Watch. Now, Pontiac. They say the Invicta really takes to the hills. Engine braking, coasting down the same steep grade and drive with the engines idling. The 300's 3-speed transmission holds back more safely than the Invicta's 2-speed transmission. We're humping along at 60. Me on the left, then Buick, Olds, then Pontiac. When the flag goes down, we'll tromp on our brakes hard for a real panic stop. Now. Maybe this isn't the best angle to see the difference, so let's try it again. The 300 beats the Invicta even with its fin-cooled aluminum brake drums. We tried this many times, and every time we tried it, wet or dry pavement, they came out in the same order. We got a torture road at the proving grounds that can be about as rough on a car's suspension system as any stretch of cow path in America. So this competition puts the 300's unibody and torsion bar suspension up against the BOP car's body-on frame and coil springs. Hold on to your hats now. It's going to be rough. We're going 45 or 50, so maybe things are happening too fast to see. Lean back and enjoy it in slow motion. Watch how the 300 recovers faster than the others. Frame on the Buick's actually pounding the pavement. Watch the Olds' front wheels and you can see daylight under them. America's #1 road car, they call it. Landing like a jackrabbit with fallen arches. Quick, positive steering response is important to good control, so I led the BOP cars through a slalom course. Watch what happened to them when they tried to keep up, as I wormed around those pylons in the 300 as fast as I could without losing control. To keep control, the others had to slow down, so they fell behind. Oops again. It's fall behind or slide out of control for the BOP boys. Sports car feel on curves, they say. What do you say? Superior roadability, they say. Also, you're out front in action. What kind of action? I'm still threading that 300 through like a greased snake swallowing a corkscrew. But dig the car with the road-leveling wide track stance. car can actually turn on a dime, but let's see which one came closest to it. After lining up even, we all crammed our wheels to the right as far as they'd go. Pontiac cut 3.5 feet off their turning radius in '62. Tough on a car, but the 300 can take it. Rigging tires to blow out on cue is quite a trick. On the 300 and on the Invicta, dynamite caps were put in the sidewalls and wired to special wheel covers. From these, wires ran up to our steering wheels. It was hooked up, so when I got the 300 up to 60 miles an hour, I just pushed the horn button and she held straight, and the tire stayed on the rim. Now let's see what happened when we did the same thing with the Buick Invicta. Got her up to 60. Pushed the horn button. Boy, it's a good thing that tire didn't wrap around the steering linkage. With a car full of kids, I'd rather be driving the Chrysler. Incidentally, when we examined the rims, the Chrysler's with its 2 safety ridges was as good as new, while the Invicta rim, that tries to hold the tire on with just 1 ridge, was ruined. Well, these are only some of the built-in differences we found comparing the 300 to these BOP competitors. Test drivers don't necessarily know the problems of convincing a prospect that the Chrysler's the best buy, but we're sold. We're enthusiastic about the Chrysler because we know what it'll do. So it seems to me that if lots of people knew about this great new car and why, when it comes to performance, it's the proven leader, as far as we test drivers are concerned, it's a standout leader, then lots of people are going to end up behind the wheel of a new Chrysler.
Today, you've seen proof positive that the Chrysler line for '62 surpasses anything in its field. You've seen and you've heard the reasons why. You've got a great product. You've got the selling ammunition in these 3 great series. The Newport, the full-size price surprise at $29.64. The 300 Sports Series, a high-performance car in a popular price range. And the New Yorker, the most luxurious Chrysler. The Fast Start meeting earlier this year gave you a good foundation of product knowledge. This meeting gives you what you need to maintain the Fast Start momentum.
and to sell Chrysler over competition. With this knowledge, you can sell against competition with confidence and enthusiasm. As you know, these are the weapons that you need to go out and to capture the competitive owners in your area. And remember, conquest selling offers you the best chance to put money in your pocket. But conquest selling is no pushover. It's tough. You gotta fight for the business. So in addition to product knowledge, confidence, and enthusiasm, you'll need another ingredient, aggressiveness. And using it, you can get your share of the conquest business. You've got to use all of these weapons in your day-to-day selling if you're going to put the competitive owners in your Chryslers. Now, for the last 2 10-day periods in December, let's concentrate on these competitive owners. For the Medallion Club salesmen who do the best job during these periods, we're going to have some special awards. These awards will be made for the top conquest sales in each region. So start lining up your competitive owners now for contact. The full details of these awards will be sent you shortly. Now, we've got a good start for this model year, so let's go after those Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac owners and make this year our biggest conquest year.